It was just a routine morning for Police Sergeant Fry on the 1st of March 1947. He had a warrant of commitment for the recovery of a debt of £23 issued by the courts. Between 9:30 and 10 a.m. that day, he knocked on the premises at 100 Henley Beach Road, Mile End, but received no answer. Undaunted, the policeman went around to the back of the property, where there was a workshop, in search of an occupant. There was nobody about, but Sergeant Fry noticed a small, grimy box about 20 inches long and 8 inches wide, laying on a heap of rubbish. One end of the box had been eaten away, presumably by vermin. Inside, he could see the dead body of a diminutive child. Looking around further, he found two more boxes, one of them nailed closed, near a wall of the workshop. There was nobody about, so he left, but he returned 3 or 4 times during the afternoon. Following his discovery, recent anonymous calls made by nearby residents to police about foul odours in the vicinity made sense. While such a discovery would ordinarily ring alarm bells about some sadistic serial killer, the home, shop and workshop were the site of Albert Charles Warman, undertaker. Still, police had questions for Mr. Warman. Finally, at 6 p.m, Warman's wife was home when police returned. Asked about the nasty smell, she replied that she didn't think there were any bodies present. Police searched and located 3 or 4 bodies tossed among wood shavings in kerosene cases and a fruit box. 2 more were wrapped in paper, lying on shelves. Bert Warman himself returned home and learned what had been happening in his absence, and went to the Theberton police station about 9:15 that night. Escorted back to his home by police, who asked him to open all the boxes in his workshop, he did so. 9 dead babies in all, including a set of twins, had been scattered throughout the workshop. Police sifted some ashes in the yard and found small bones, indicating that Warman had cremated at least one body. The tiny corpses were taken away to the city morgue, where they were examined. Most of the babies were stillborn, or had only lived for a few hours. The oldest was thought to have lived for about 3 weeks. Warman assured the police that he had burial warrants for all of the babies, but just hadn't gotten around to burying them. One of the bodies, he admitted, had been in his workshop since 1941. He also claimed he had not received his fee for burial in one instance. In the 1940s, parents of children who died so soon after birth often did not insist on burial, but left their dead child with an undertaker, who would arrange the burial. The South Australian Health Act, curiously, only stipulated that it was an offence to fail to bury the bodies of dead animals. It did not mention the bodies of people, other than people who had died of an infectious disease, who had to be buried within 48 hours. So Warman had not broken the law in retaining the deceased infants. He was nevertheless taken to jail over the original matter of the non-payment of the sum ordered by the court. His default penalty was 10 days inside. The baby's fate was not disclosed, but were probably buried in West Terrace Cemetery. The Warman family's association with the funeral industry dated back to the 1860s. Heinrich Friedrich Wallmann was a carpenter, upholsterer and undertaker. In those days you could buy a pool table and arrange Grandma's burial at the same time. Heinrich died in 1872. Around 1880, Bert's grandfather, Rudolf Theodor Wallmann, started R.T. Warman and Sons Undertakers. Albert Ernest Warman, Bert's father, joined the family business when he was old enough. In 1904 he married, and Albert Charles was born in 1905. Bert Warman was one of life's losers. He was fined for speeding in his car in August 1927, clocked at a dizzying 27 miles per hour, when the speed limit was 20 miles per hour, or 32 kilometres per hour, in the city and suburbs. Just 4 months later, the speed limit was raised to 25 miles per hour, and police had a policy of not fining motorists unless they were at least 5 miles per hour over the limit. Undertaker Harry Bower purchased the trade name H.F. Warman, or Warman, at 22 Henley Beach Road, Mile End, in October 1928. The business begun by Bert's great-grandfather decades earlier. In November 1929, Bert opened his funeral parlour as Warman and Son at 100 Henley Beach Road. Albert Ernest then was based at Pulteney Street in the city, operating R.T. Warman and Son. and in July 1930 extended his business to include 100 Henley Beach Road. Bauer took the matter to court in May 1933, claiming that the Wallmans were attempting to mislead people that it was part of Bauer's business. Bauer claimed £2,000 damages and an order restraining the pair from using the name Wallman and Son. The Wallmans in turn claimed £500 damages from Bauer, stating that they did not infringe on the H.F. Wallman name, but were merely using their own names. The parties struck an agreement out of court to settle the dispute. More serious legal problems arose in 1940, however, due to Wallman's brother-in-law, Gaston Oigard Cornelius. Wallman had married Muriel Oigard Cornelius in 1934. In 1937, on the 10th of March, a young woman named Chrissy Eileen Hope Fatchen married in secret. The 21-year-old was pregnant and somehow became aware of pamphlets sent out by Nurse Blanche, offering the sale of pills to induce an abortion. Her new husband initially got in touch with Nurse Blanche, who was actually Gaston and his wife, operating from their home in Victoria Avenue, Forestville, and then later a box of pills was sold to Chrissy. On the 13th of May, she died in Waikerie Hospital. It was only then that her mother learnt she was married. Police investigated pamphlets and black pills and interviewed Gaston. He at first denied all knowledge of Mrs. Fatchen, until her name was located in his files. He then said the pills were not meant for inducing an abortion, but were intended as a corrective method, whatever that meant. Gaston had made a lucrative trade in selling his quack medicines and certain rubber articles, and although he was not charged with having caused the woman's death, he was charged with selling noxious drugs. It should be noted that the actual pills were available at chemists, but not for the purpose that he sold them for. Gaston was 48. Born in Britain, he had come to Australia in 1913. He had no formal training in medicine, but had made a 20-year study of birth control. He, his wife, a son from a former marriage, and a female assistant sold contraceptives at a shop in Curry Street, Adelaide. At the time there were dozens of such businesses in every Australian state, acting just on the edge of the law. Bickford's, a manufacturing chemist, sold Gaston 1,200 gross of each of two types of pills yearly. He was one of their biggest customers, which would have netted him £3,000 profit each year alone. At a trial in September, a jury failed to agree on a verdict, but at a second trial in October he was found guilty. He was sentenced to 18 months' imprisonment. Wallman visited his brother at Kiama prison camp in the Adelaide Hills in April 1938, and the two men spoke business. Bert wanted to loan £100 to set up a branch of his undertaking business on Goodwood Road, near where Gaston lived. Gaston was to be engaged there once he was released from prison. Bert got the money despite a heated argument with Gaston's wife Marion, who did not want to hand over the money. Wallman, having received this money, then tried to defraud Gaston, who had petitioned for release but had failed. He said if Gaston gave him another £100, he could put up a bond for him with the authorities. There was in fact no such system in place for prisoners to be released under bond. Bert claimed he did not know this until after he had asked for the money and spoken to the chief secretary. He then decided to add the money to the Goodwood deal. Gaston was released in August 1938, changing his name by deed poll to James Cornelius, but didn't go into partnership with Bert, instead asking in vain for his money to be returned to him. In April 1940 he sued Bert to reclaim £219. Bert counterclaimed, insisting that by failing to enter into partnership he had lost £468 on the deal. The court case went against Bert, who was ordered to repay £100. He had spent the money on renovations to the house at Goodwood and was unable to pay. In the following month he applied for bankruptcy, with liabilities of £662, but assets of only £94. He had been paying small amounts to creditors since 1934. It was found that Bert had committed 6 offences under the Bankruptcy Act, including attempting to hide part of his estate. In December 1938, knowing he was insolvent, he nevertheless entered into a contract to purchase an £81 refrigerator. He had also failed to keep proper account books for 2 years before his bankruptcy. In short, his financial affairs were an utter mess. On the charge of failing to keep proper records, he was sentenced to a month's imprisonment on the 10th of January 1941. In 1943 he again fell foul of the law, this time to the peculiar laws which pertained to the sale of alcohol in South Australia at that time. He had ordered some bottles of beer and a bottle of wine from the Mile End Hotel, promising to pick it up by 2 p.m. After that hour on a Saturday, it was illegal to sell alcohol. Warman didn't arrive until 8 p.m, and after an argument was sold the liquor, but was stopped by police as he drove out of the pub. He was fined £5. In September 1945, he was fined £3 for listening to a wireless radio without a government licence. In early 1947, he again had money woes, which led to the arrival of Sergeant Fry and the discovery of 9 babies found in boxes. Bert Warman died on the 28th of September 1949 at the age of 44. His father, Albert Ernest, outlived his son and passed away in February 1952, during the last years of his life managing to become involved in the unsolved murder of Adelaide gangster George Bray. But that is another story from the dark corners of history.